Hello, this is George Gann with the Institute for Regional Conservation. I put together a short slideshow in preparation for our tour this coming Saturday with the Beach Property Owners Association in Delray Beach. Before we dive into the detail, I just want to thank the Beach Property Owners Association for this opportunity to do the tour. Also to the staff of IRC and to Rob Barron for contributing both PowerPoint slides and also just a wealth of knowledge about the history of the dune system in Delray Beach. Our work on the dunes in Delray Beach is also part of our Restoring the Gold Coast program that received significant funding from Impact 100 Palm Beach County in 2019, but also has been supported by a growing number of collaborators and funders, including New York Life, the BPOA, Aaron DD, Boca Raton, the Town of Ocean Ridge, Surfrider, and many other organizations and supporters. Also, we did a webinar recently on sea grapes and biodiversity that's available on our website in the Restoring the Gold Coast program on that page. And so if you want to check that out, it's a little bit of a longer presentation if you want to follow up. The first thing that we want to take into consideration is the incredible change in the dune system in Delray Beach. There's quite a bit of historical information about the dune system, not as much as we would like, but we know that the vegetation has changed dramatically since people began to settle the area. So this is a photograph that's actually hanging in the city of Delray Beach City Hall, and it's an image that shows the vegetation dominated by saw palmettos and shrubs and vines and grasses and herbs. And there's really not a forest of sea grapes or other kinds of vegetation here. What we know is that by the late 1960s, most of the beach dune and coastal strand, the shrubby community along the beach had eroded into the sea. And this was due to a combination of jetties and other kinds of hard structures built out into the ocean and also other kinds of development. But the bottom line is that most of the native vegetation was just simply gone by this time. In the early 1980s, the city began a bunch of different efforts to replant native vegetation. Prior to that, there had been some other efforts, including planting exotics and trying to harden the shoreline and so forth. But really, this began the first part of the successful effort to restore the beach dune system. And here you can see an early photograph from 1986. And one of the things that we know is that the sea grapes really didn't grow all that much until more of the beach dune system was restored. So this effort to plant sea grapes and then sea oats and other things to lesser extent were wildly successful. The sea grapes grew and the sea oats captured sand and so forth. But the sea grapes really began to occupy a lot more space than is really healthy for the dune system. So Rob has really done a great job of documenting the history of the sea grapes and their expansion over time. And so in this particular slide, you can see the red outline is the original planting area of the sea grapes. Then the yellow outline is the area as it was when the permit, one of the DEP permits was being prepared in 2001. And then the white line around 2015. You can also see some patches of exotics, the blue being the invasive latherleaf, and the pink being coin vine. We'll take a look at a bunch of different kinds of invasive species when we're out on the dune. One of the tools that we have is this map that was made by Rob Barron many years ago and used by many over the years. And it shows the sections of the dunes between the walkovers, and it's a convenient way of keeping track of where you are. We have lists of all the different native plants from each of these different sections. And on the map, you have Atlantic Avenue on the lower right-hand side of the slide. And where it's marked shelter, you have the new pavilion. So we'll be meeting at the north side of the pavilion. And then we'll be looking at areas 14, 15, and 16. In area 14, across from what was the Marriott, now the Opal Grand, we did a planting in 2016 in an area that had been cleared of invasives. We'll take a look at that in a moment, and then we'll also be looking at some newer plantings in area 16 in conjunction with the sea grape trimming and some biodiversity plantings for restoring the Gold Coast. We also have these maps from 2020 prepared by Aptum and WGI in the city of Delray Beach, which show the outline of the sea grapes as they are now, the areas to be trimmed, the areas where sea grapes have not been trimmed to date, and then also the smaller clumps of sea grapes that are beginning to expand into the eastern part of the dune. Here we are across the street from the Opal Grand in section 14. So this is our planting day, and where we were working in an area where invasive species, both native and exotic, had been removed. And you can see the sea grapes to the north, and we did not do any trimming of sea grapes top to bottom, but we did do some laterals where the sea grapes were beginning to encroach upon the dune. Just another slide of kind of the central portion, and you can see that most of the vegetation in this particular area had been removed because it was invasive. Here's another view looking to the southeast toward the lifeguard station, and you'll be able to see that sable palm or cabbage palm on the left when we're on site, and then you can see the sea grapes to the south, and you can get an idea of how dominant the sea grapes were in this particular area prior to trimming. We'll also take a look at some of the newer plantings that are following the current round of trimming, including areas where invasive species have been removed, and also out in the dune and the grassy areas to augment the biodiversity, and some areas in the east where the sea grape patches are planned to be removed. Once we're done there, we're going to go down to Atlantic Dunes and take a look at what's going on there. There's been a huge amount of change in that particular system since the early 1990s. This is a slide from Rob Barron that shows freeze damage on the eastern part of Atlantic Dunes, and I want you to notice that that path. I've drawn the blue arrow there because we're going to see the outline of that path in the field, and you're going to be able to get an idea of how much change has actually occurred in that particular area. And what we want to look at there is, unlike on the municipal beach where the erosion went right up to A1A, there was remnant native vegetation at Atlantic Dunes, and this is one of the systems. There are others in the area where the coastal strand, the last bits of coastal strand in southeastern Palm Beach County are being overwhelmed by a combination of invasive species, non-natives, and also native things like sea grapes and coin vine and so forth. So I wanted to point out these dead saw palmettos and kind of on the left, the struggle of the saw palmettos to stay alive while they're being overwhelmed by other plants. We'll talk a little bit in the field about the causes of sea grape expansion, and there are many, and we don't understand it fully, but here's an image from Atlantic Dunes. You'll see this. This is up by the restrooms, and this is looking to the north, and we'll see the sea grapes and the sea grape forest, and also the patch of saw palmettos that are barely hanging in there, trying to survive under too much shade. Here's the eastern part of Atlantic Dunes, and this is the area where we started working in early 2016, removing primarily Brazilian pepper, a coin vine, and other invasive species. Scaevola is also there. And you can see that this is just wide open. Almost nothing was growing underneath this canopy of Brazilian pepper. And you'll be able to see how much recovery that we've gotten since that time. Of course, I'm not going to show you everything because then you wouldn't have any reason to go out there and take a look. So the idea is just to give you kind of some befores, and you'll have to see the afters when you're in the field. So this project's been going on for a while, and so now we're in year number 5. This is John Miller, one of our key volunteers who's been helping to remove the invasives in the park. Here he is almost done with one of the areas that along the eastern side of the dune, where we're almost finished with that bit. So you'll be able to see the top of that dune and the dune plantings that we've done there. Our work at Atlantic Dunes has been assisted by a large number of funders, volunteer groups, individuals, you name it. And so I just want to just give you an idea of all of the energy that's gone behind what you're going to see in the field on Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about the opportunities for restoration and connectivity and how there's just so much that we can do with what we have to work with. We'll talk about how the work that we're doing to restore biodiversity and the native dune ecosystem is underpinned by the principles of ecological restoration produced by the Society for Ecological Restoration. How we're using the evidence that we have, the information that we can find in the field, using tools like iNaturalist to map recruitment of saw palmettos and other species so that we know how far east we can bring the coastal strand, because most of the dune system now that's not under sea grapes is under grasses, and that's good, but we also want to have the saw palmetto dominated coastal strand with all of its group of shrubs and vines and herbs and so forth, including some that are incredibly rare. Also, the idea that we use reference sites from wherever the closest that we can get, and the ones that we think are closest to what we're working with. And these reference sites are really important in terms of thinking about, what it is that we're trying to get to in terms of our restoration goals and targets. So that's it. I just want to give you a little bit of background, and see you on Saturday, 9 a.m., north side of the pavilion at Atlantic and A1A. Thanks a lot.